Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my Star Wars The Last Jedi t-shirt on, my Star Wars The Last Jedi movie right next to me, and as you can judge by the frame around me, we are back to the 6 things that fans of The Last Jedi are getting wrong, Redux. This was the second video I ever did here on this channel. And I was watching it one day and realized that there was a lot more that I wanted to talk about, and I really didn't kind of articulate back then what I was trying to say. Video quality was kind of poor. I was having trouble with lighting and sound and everything else, and so I decided it was time to kind of go back and redo everything. In the last episode, and I know that it's kind of been a hot minute since I've actually done this series, so I went back and started watching this. Brandon here from Left Foot Media was talking about the Frank Spencer-esque style of what Rian Johnson sort of had Luke do in The Last Jedi, and how it was like, ooh, I've ignited my lightsaber and I'm standing over Kylo Ren like I'm gonna kill him, and oh no, please don't use the Force on me, Mr. Kylo. And I was trying to explain towards the end of that it's like, no, dude, that was part of the slow reveal that we got through the 3 scenes, okay? That the first scene that we get the slow reveal in, Luke just kind of stands there and says, it's like, there was, it's like, I became this legend, and in my hubris, I went and taught some new students, and here comes Ben with his mighty Skywalker blood. I thought I could train him, and it turns out I was wrong, so, I screwed up, and so I left. Then we hear it from Ben's point of view, where he says, he feared my power that I was gaining. He feared how I was a person, how I was doing things. Man, he just wanted everything that I had, and he was just, prepared to do anything at all to take over. And, and even going so far as to come in when I was sleeping, and he was going to kill me with his lightsaber. And so Rey attacks Luke because she's not sure who to believe at this point. So Luke finally tells her exactly what happened, okay? That he had sensed moments of darkness in Kylo's training. He had come in, and he was about ready. He was poised and ready, and he was going to strike him down. And then all of a sudden he realized, oh no, that's, not the way to do things, because, well, that would actually, kill, because that's the path to the dark side, okay? In the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary, there is now an official timeline as of the Rise of Skywalker movie in 2019 that talks a little bit about in 19, before Starkiller incident, Luke begins to train Ben. Says, I'm sensing the continued presence of the dark side. Luke starts investigating leads that mention Exegol. And then in 6 BSI, Ben Solo destroys Luke's Jedi Temple. Luke vanishes. Han and Leia drift apart. And Leia's ousted from the New Republic politics by scandal. She begins forming a paramilitary resistance group. And so that was kind of the official timeline of how long it was between when Luke started training Jedi, including Ben, and then his temple was destroyed. So there was 13 years there, okay? So it was long enough for Ben to start to learn how to use the Force, but it doesn't say exactly when. If in 6 BSI was the moment that confrontation happened. We just know that confrontation happened, and that it caused Luke to question his willingness and his ability to be able to train Jedi and be able to, make be able to do what needs, what needs to be done. And so he spent so much time, trying to do the right thing in training, that when it all fell down around him, he was like, oh no, this is bad. Okay? And I've read from the Rise of Skywalker, not Rise of Skywalker, but the Last Jedi Visual Dictionary, where it says, since the fiery collapse of his Jedi training temple, Luke Skywalker has put that part of his life behind him, focusing instead on the task of living on Acto. In many ways, the toil of his existence on the island mirrors his youth spent in Tatooine. Chores he spent a great energy avoiding in his teen years now mark the clock of his long, tiring island days. The native caretakers pay Luke little mind, for though his spirit is troubled and his view of the Jedi has clouded, he exhibits no outward ill will to the island itself and the history it contains. Skywalker has instead respected the island life asks of him what island life has asked of him, and has carved out a place for himself in this harsh environment. And then it kind of talks about some of the tools that he's been using and like some of the stuff that he does. And so that's kind of the point that I was making. And I think I also read, and I have a little bit of it here. Let me just drop this over and grab it. I also read a little bit from the Rise of Skywalker, not Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi novelization. So the whole point of this being that when people like this try to make something out of nothing, and they try to use non-lore related reasons to try to make it seem like there's some kind of bad issue with the movie. They're like, oh, it's bad storytelling because they didn't earn it. They don't have to earn it other than just allowing us to understand what the story is. And if we can understand what the story is, and we can use lore to justify that reason, that's all the reason you need, especially in a fictional, universe like Star Wars. I mean, as I stated before, there was, many thousands of stories of things like Jedi Academy, where Luke was an ascetic monk, and he, was running around doing random stuff, and there was no, how to explain this? There was no way for there to be anything other than what we saw. Because, they're trying to make your character the main character, but, it's like that story has a lot more problems than The Last Jedi because, where was Luke? He was supposedly on Korriban, but we never saw him. Where was Kyle Katarn? Well, he said he'd meet us there, but you don't see him until the very final cutscene. It's like you have to take out every single Dark Jedi there. Like, your folks don't do a damn thing to lift a finger to help you. I mean, and you have to take down Marka Ragnos all by yourself? And a Jedi that like, Tavion, that, like, barely even Kyle Katarn could deal with in the previous game. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're supposed to be a Jedi Padawan. You're not even a full-fledged knight yet. And yet, you're taking down a 5,000-year-old Sith Lord spirit inhabiting the body of a Dark Jedi. It doesn't make any sense. With, like, barely any training, because, I mean, all you have for training is going on certain missions and stuff. And that's not necessarily training because, you learn stuff so quickly that it's a wonder that you don't fall to the dark side in the game. I mean, I get that, like Rosh was kind of put there as sort of an irritant in the game to make you, maybe want to try the dark side path a few times. But it's so easy to walk the path of the light side in that game, whereas in, like, Jedi Knight, and Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast, it was very easy to walk the path of the dark side, because there were tons of innocents that you could just walk around and slaughter with your lightsaber and shoot with various guns. I mean, if you wanted to. And that was how you could go do that. So, it's so much easier to see where Rian Johnson was going with Star Wars: The Last Jedi. So let's jump back in, and let's continue on with this debunk of Brandon's points here.
It's not that there's character development happening. The problem is the way they executed that character development and how flawed the execution was.
Actually, no. The execution was not flawed, and the character development, which he mentions, was actually there and was actually done correctly. And the problem is, and this is where we as fans of Star Wars say you didn't watch the film. It's not that we're saying that this film is high art and you need to watch it multiple times. We're saying you need to go back and actually watch the film and actually see where they're coming from. Are they doing it the way that they're supposed to be doing it? Are they doing it the way that it's supposed to be done? Are the characters done correctly? The answer is yes. You missed that, and now we're saying go back and watch it again.
Another fallacy I'm hearing a lot of is this claim that, well, the original trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, that wasn't perfect storytelling. It had flaws in it. So what are you complaining about this one for? Well, yes, that's true. The original trilogy did have flaws in it. No one's saying it was perfect storytelling. In fact, I think most people are sane enough to realise that there is pretty much no such thing as a perfect movie.
Well, actually, I'd beg to differ with you, son. Because there are a lot of people out there that talk about the original trilogy as if it was the most perfect trilogy on the earth. And that the prequel trilogy and now the sequel trilogy just suck. And it wasn't until the sequel trilogy came along that the prequel haters finally went, oh, well, maybe these aren't so bad. Oh, maybe they're actually pretty good movies. And we're like, we only said that for 20 fucking years. Okay? So no, dude, people do believe that the original trilogy is like the perfect trilogy. And I have said this many times before. I will shit on the original trilogy to prove a point. Okay? Because it needs to happen. Because you need to dispel that notion of the trilogy is perfect. Because you're looking at it through rose-colored glasses. Oh, yeah. Yes, it has plenty wrong with it, storytelling-wise. Okay? But so does the prequel trilogy, so does the sequel trilogy, but they all tell a good story. They all tell a good story. Whether or not you want to believe it, that's another issue.
Very, very, very few films you could actually claim are perfect films.
Well, I will say one thing. These films, right here, okay, are about as close to perfect as you can fucking get. Okay? and I will fight anyone that says differently, because these films are damn good. Okay? And by contrast, this film is one of the shittiest films ever made. Okay? And this film shouldn't even exist. In fact, this film should be on the garbage ash heap of the whole fucking world, because it is dumb. Okay? And like I've said before, I will watch this film 100,000 times over this film any day. Okay? And you know what? That goes for this film too. I would watch this film 1,000,000 times over rather than this piece of fucking bullshit. Or this piece of fucking garbage. Okay? Because these two films have so much wrong that they need a lot of work. And this should have been the next this. Okay? Because that's what it should have been. And instead, we get this animated piece of fucking garbage. Okay? That was just hastily thrown together. Yes, it tells the story, but you can't mix 2D animation and 3D CGI in the same frame and expect it to be the best animation ever. In fact, like I've said before, it looks like a kindergartner's, or maybe, okay, maybe that's being a little too harsh. It looks like a first-year computer programmer's experiment. Okay? Where they took some animation and they kind of threw it out there. Now, this film has some live-action elements in it because they used live-action elements to make the film, okay? And when they realized that they were getting to a certain point in development and they needed to get the movie out into theaters and onto store shelves, they Bakshi just said, look, just disguise the live action footage of the orcs with some animated elements and throw it in the movie and just get it out there, because honestly, at this point, we need to get the movie out the door. And that's what they did. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. Because it makes sense for what they did with it. And I'm cool with it. It works. But this film, in and of itself, okay, compared to, like, say, this Lord of the Rings, it's a good film. But it's inferior because, I mean, and the voice acting's solid. You know, the story's there, but there's a lot fundamentally wrong with it. And because of Warner Brothers and how Rankin Bass were handling The Hobbit, and at the time, they said that they wanted to continue. Ralph Bakshi was already making this version, so they were allowed to create Return of the King, and so they were only allowed to adapt the first 2 books. Because he had actually had a plan to kind of make like an epic third part to this film, when instead Rankin Bass just kind of half-assed threw out the Return of the King movie that reused a lot of the footage from The Hobbit, which was actually a really good telling of the Hobbit book. Don't get me wrong, it was really well done, but their version of Return of the King, if you watch it after watching this, you note that the animation is very simple, and it's also very much just The Hobbit just reskinned in Return of the King. Like, all the battle sequences are lifted directly from The Hobbit and put right back into the thing. I mean, that's all they did. So, my point is that, yes, there are films with fundamental flaws. But, to me, I would watch these films way more than those other 2 films I just mentioned, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within and Dragonlance Chronicles, Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Because in watching it, in fact, I would go so far as to say I would rather watch this film than Dragonlance Chronicles of Autumn Twilight, and I've ripped this film apart on the channel before, okay? Because it's a crappy knockoff version of Lord of the Rings that doesn't even tell a good story, but it's cheesy fun and it has a decent cast. Okay? So I would watch it over Dragonlance, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, because Dragonlance Chronicles is what it should have been, the next Lord of the Rings. And instead they turned it into a cheesily animated fuckfest that just doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. Okay? And no. This movie, with all of its flaws, is still way better, fundamentally, story-wise, character-wise, and everything than this piece of shit. Okay? And I will stand by that till I die. Okay? That is the hill I will die on.
And certainly not that original trilogy. It's not perfect filmmaking. But the problems and the flaws that you might see in the original trilogy are very, very different to what we see in this new trilogy, in particular in The Last Jedi. And one of the big problems here is I've seen people saying, well, there's some similarities and people didn't get upset about, say, for example, this is one example of a plot point that people are referring to a lot. Well, we don't really know much about who Emperor Palpatine was in Return of the Jedi and in that first trilogy. They don't tell his backstory and no one really got upset about that. It's because we didn't need to know his backstory. We knew everything we needed to know about Emperor Palpatine in that first trilogy. It was just really well done storytelling.
Okay, what did we know about him in the first thing? In the first film, in the VHS copy, in the original theatrical run of Empire Strikes Back, like, we knew nothing about the Emperor in Episode 4. We just knew there was an Empire, so there must have been an Emperor. Okay, that's all we knew. In the second film, we hear the Emperor commands you to make contact with him. And he's like, move the ship out of the asteroid field so that we can send a clear signal. So then they come out of the asteroid field, and he goes in, and he sits down. There is a great disturbance in the Force. I felt it, my master. And then they have that come back and forth, okay? The son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi. And that's all we see of him, okay? And thus begins his quest to go and, convert Luke over to the dark side or kill him in the process, okay? That was Darth Vader's mission after that. Okay, so he finds the Millennium Falcon, and he tails them to Bespin, and he subjugates Luke and Leia to lure Luke, or subjugates Han and Leia and Chewie to bring Luke out of hiding, okay, on Dagobah while he was training, to lure him to the dark side. And that's all we knew of the Emperor. In the third film, we learned that the Emperor himself is going to personally oversee the construction of the Death Star. Plus, we hear Ben tell Luke that, we hear Yoda say, do not underestimate the Emperor. We also hear him say, the Emperor, we also hear Ben say that the Emperor is very dangerous, to Luke. And that he should remember his training and everything like that. And he gets in his X-Wing and he flies off to the fleet. And then he goes to Darth Vader on Endor and gets taken before the Emperor. And we see the Emperor in the major procession about midway through the film when he first arrives on the Death Star. Rise, my friend. And we understand that he's this frail old man, but contained within that frail old man is energies we couldn't possibly understand. He's like the wizened old evil wizard who kind of sits there and is like, acts benign, but then at the same time turns around and just, can unleash wild, dark energy that can just, kill a single person like that. Okay? And we kind of understand that because Vader is afraid of him. Okay? Even though he has a mask on and even though he's moving around, he always keeps a respectful distance. And he always kind of, doesn't really do much. We understand that he's afraid of him. Okay? And the way that the Emperor is undone is Vader finally decides to make a decision. Son, Emperor. Son, Emperor. Emperor, son. Throws the Emperor off, okay? To save his son. At the cost of his own life. Okay? Thus redeeming himself and coming back to the light side. We meet Supreme Leader Snoke in Episode 7. And he says much the same that the Emperor says in Episode 5. There has been an awakening. Have you felt it? It's like, yes, my master. It's like, oh. Okay, so Snoke, like the Emperor, Force sensitive. Cool. We're gonna get a little bit more into this, but we're gonna jump in and kind of finish this point really fast, and then we'll come back to Snoke.
Right, we're introduced to him very briefly in The Empire Strikes Back, and then he comes into his own in Return of the Jedi. And the Emperor Palpatine is this evil character who is like, he's Darth Vader on steroids, and he's got all these extra powers. He can shoot lightning from his fingertips. This is like evil on a whole nother level. This is malevolence like we've never seen before. And we get enough of who he is, the way he's portrayed, the way he's written. It's clear what his role is in the story. He appears not in the first film in the trilogy, but really in the final film is where he really comes into his own. And it all makes sense. We don't need to know his backstory. It's obvious. We've effectively told everything we need to know. But Snoke, for example, is nothing like the Emperor Palpatine. And the reason this is different is because, well, not only is Snoke introduced in the first film of this new trilogy, but this is a very well-established universe now, and we're talking about a series of films that are supposed to be sequels to that original trilogy. They are following that, they're built in that same universe, they follow a certain continuity.
Okay, wait a minute. What continuity are you referring to? Are you referring to the Legends EU continuity? Because that was thrown out by Disney. Okay? So there is no well-established universe. There is literally, as of the making of episode 7, there was really only there was one, 2, and 3. Okay, which detail the great tragedy of Anakin Skywalker, his fall from grace, the ascendancy of the Empire, the rise of Palpatine, sort of giving us the backstory that we never got in these films, okay, 4, 5, and 6, okay, so this is my original trilogy, and then this is my prequel trilogy. And then, of course, we have the Clone Wars 2008 movie and the Clone Wars television show and Rebels. Those are the only established canon when Disney went to make Episode 7. That was it. No books, no comics, no nothing. Because basically, at that point, they were saying, we're starting over, okay? Because they wanted to go and make a separate trilogy of movies that were unconstrained by the limitations of the Legends EU universe, which is one of the reasons why we never got a proper sequel trilogy in the Legends EU timeline, because there was no way to write the stories in around that. Even though George Lucas had written an outline for one, by the time he had gotten finished with Episode 3 in 2005, and he was kind of trying to figure out how he was going to write, the Legends EU timeline was so overbloated with bullshit stories that he didn't know where he would fit in the stories that needed to be told. So, when Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, came out, okay, we are introduced to Supreme Leader Snoke. Now, let me see, does this have... No, it doesn't really talk about him that much. I don't think this one really talks about him that much, but we can... So yeah, I mean, really, when, like I said before, when we were introduced to him, Snoke, we learn is Force sensitive because he says there's been an awakening in the Force. Have you felt it? And he says, yes, my master. And so you're kind of like, oh, okay, so he understands the Force like the Emperor did. But we also understand that he is not the Emperor. Okay? There's 34. Though his name is known to the galaxy, and his reputation as the supreme leader of the First Order precedes him, few have ever seen Snoke in the flesh. He obscures himself with distance, being forever unreachable save for a select few who can contact him directly. Even under such circumstances, Snoke disguises his true nature. Whatever frailties have broken his body are dwarfed by the immense size at which he typically projects his form. Heart of Darkness. Snoke is powerful in the dark side of the Force, but he is no Sith. That 1,000-year lineage, stretching back from Darth Bane to the last Sith Lord Darth Vader, was undone when Vader died, destroying his mentor Darth Sidious. The fulfillment of an ancient prophecy foretold the end of the Sith, but it never predicted the end of darkness. And then it talks about some of his different things that he has. A couple of the data files down here. It says, Snoke took Ben Solo as his apprentice, as he believed only someone of the Skywalker bloodline could destroy the Last Jedi, being Skywalker himself. Snoke's physical skills may have faded, but his Force-aided abilities to persuade, manipulate, and perceive are tremendous. And we learn that through the fact that he gave Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens. We learn that Kylo got Vader's old mask from Endor. Okay? And so and we learn that's how Snoke kind of swayed Kylo over to his side, okay? Was by saying, you're the heir to this legacy of darkness. And that's why it's like we see Kylo and he's like, I feel it again, the pull to the light. Show me, once more how we can do this, and I will finish what you started, grandfather. And then you see him get up and move, and then we see the mask of Darth Vader there. Okay, so let's finish up.
Well-established lore here. There's a well-established universe. There's a well-established set of characters and events that have brought us to this point. And then all of a sudden you introduce this new and very, very evil and super-powered villain in the form of Snoke. Once again, no one's got any issues with that. The problem, though, is that there's big questions because you've got already here, unlike the Emperor Palpatine in the original trilogy, you've got a well-established universe now.
No, you don't. Again, all you have are the first 3 films, the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the Clone Wars, and Rebels. That's it. That's all you have. That's not well established. If you're talking about the Legends EU as being well established, it's gone, son. That's not part of it. And besides, how many times did Emperor Palpatine come back in the original, Legends EU canon? How many times did we see Dark Jedi, and we see Sith, and we see all these other things happening when there shouldn't have been any more Sith after Emperor Palpatine? But he kept coming back because they wanted to be able to use the Sith moniker. Okay? How many times did we see things like this, where they brought back, Sith Lord spirits and all this other fucking bullshit. Okay? And I should say that they did have... These games are not considered official canon by any stretch of the imagination, but the Old Republic is considered canon, and it uses these games as a base, the Knights of the Old Republic and KOTOR 2, the Sith Lords. So it uses these as a base because it talks about Revan, it talks about the Jedi Exile, it talks about the events that happened, talks about Malachor 5, the Mandalorian Wars. In fact, it is clearly established that those events happened here In this book, and also in these two books, it talks about the subjugation of Malachor 5, and it talks about Revan. So, I mean, technically you can consider those to be canon because they're so far removed from the original story that, I mean, honestly, you could consider them canon. No one's going to stop you. But as for everything surrounding the original prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and everything that took place from, like, basically, I think it was the Truce at Baccarat all the way out to Legacy of the Jedi is now, poof, gone. Okay? It is considered kaput. No longer canon. Which means we don't have a well-established universe beyond the first three movies, the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, the Clone Wars movie, TV show, and Rebels. That's it. Now, since then, we've added on Solo, Rogue One, the sequel trilogy, and, like, The Mandalorian, Kenobi, you know, all those different, you know, TV shows, Resistance, all those different Disney Plus shows, all of that stuff they've added on. Plus, they've added on, you know, their own canon of novels and various things where we talked about this. There's novels like there's Dark Disciple in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. There's Catalyst, which is the Rogue One novel, which takes place before Rogue One. There's Lords of the Sith. There's Tarkin, Thrawn, A New Dawn. There's the Rebels TV series, the Clone Wars TV series. There's Battlefront 2, Inferno Squad, Heir to the Jedi, Battlefront, The Twilight Company. There's Aftermath, and then Life, Debt, Empire's End, Bloodline, Phasma, Canto Bight. There's Resistance Reborn. There is a ton of freaking brand new comics that Marvel has made, that because Marvel was given a license from Dark Horse after the sale from Lucasfilm to Disney, from George Lucas to Disney, because Marvel was under the Disney umbrella. So they were like, here, here's, they basically like said to Dark Horse, they said, we're taking the license back and we're giving it to Marvel again, because Marvel had it back in the 70s when the first movie came out. And so the problem comes then that if you're looking at this through the lens of the Legends EU, which a lot of fans are doing, which is wrong, then you're going, well, we don't see Snoke in the original trilogy. Well, duh. That's because you have to understand that that canon was thrown out in favor of this new canon. Okay? And if you're not looking at it that way, then son, you're barking up the wrong fucking tree and you need to stop.
And everyone knows something quite important. They know that up until this point, there were really two evil bad dudes who were ruling the universe. One of them was Darth Vader, and the other one was Emperor Palpatine.
Only up until Return of the Jedi. Only up until Return of the Jedi. And then after Return of the Jedi, one of the first novel series that was written before The Force Awakens even came out, okay, was this Aftermath Life Debt, and Aftermath Empire's End. And Aftermath sort of continued the story of the Empire up until their defeat at the Battle of Jakku. Okay? And if you read the novel Lost Stars, that also kind of tells that story of, like, it was two kids who meet not Emperor Palpatine, but Grand Moff Tarkin at the beginning of the book, and then their ascendancy through the ranks of being like some of the Empire's best, and then one student goes off and joins the rebels, while another student stays in the Empire, and then it's about how they both kind of discover that they're both on the wrong side, like they both think they're on the right side of history, basically. And then at the end, the guy notices that, like, his friend is going to die on Jakku, and he's like, no, I refuse to allow that. And so he goes and is like, this is it, and it basically does that. But yeah, this is this picture here of this Star Destroyer is the Star Destroyer from the novel Lost Stars. It's called the Inflictor, and it crashed into the thing, and the main male protagonist goes up and takes the girl, the female protagonist, and drags her off the bridge, and they enter an escape pod, and they jettison themselves out onto Jakku, and then he basically is like, we're trying to, do things certain ways, and, we're trying to help you out, and so that was told in that one, but then the main Battle of Jakku was told in the novel Empire's End. And it basically ends with a rift in the Empire. And like half of the Empire's fleet disappears during the Battle of Jakku. Where did they disappear to? Well, it's pretty simple, because we know where Snoke came from, and we know what has been going on. But basically, it's let me see here. This one may or may not have. I don't think it does. Okay, this one doesn't really talk about it that much, but I know this one has one. In fact, I'm pretty sure it has one. Or was it Last Jedi? I thought this one had one. Yeah, okay. So this one has this one has a new version of the Unknown Regions. So over here is Starkiller Base, that's Ilum in the original universe. And how we know about Ilum is from the Star Wars Clone Wars TV series. Okay? Rakata Prime, which is where the Starforge from this game comes from. Okay? That's how we know that the events of that game are actually canon, is because it shows Rakata Prime. It also shows Rat Attack. It shows Malastare. And there's a couple of others. But anyway, so here's Hosnian Prime, which is one of the main Republic places. Here's Takodana, and here's Jakku. Okay? And this is where the Battle of Jakku is. And basically what it ended up happening is Exegol is like up here. In terms of the galaxy. It's like way up here, past Starkiller Base. And so when the Empire left Jakku, they fled this way. Now it's unsure if they went to Ilum and then by way of Exegol, or how they got there, but they were basically led to Snoke, and they sort of like, tried to figure out, like, what are we gonna do, and how are we gonna make this work? Okay? And so, like, here's the Last Jedi, okay? And then, so, Starkiller Base was up here, okay? Kind of about here, right? Because here's Dantooine, and then here's Acto, and here's Endor, so it was right above Endor, so it was right about here, okay? And again, Exegol is up here, in this arm of the galaxy over here, okay? The Ring of Kefrine from the Rogue One is right here, okay? Here's Crate, here's Dakar, which is where the Resistance fleet was. Cantonica's up here, which is where Canto Bight is. And so, anyway, this is kind of what the new thing was. And then this is where Hosnian Prime used to be. Okay, here's where Coruscant still is. Here's where Jeddah is. This is where they tested the Death Star the first time. Okay. I don't see... Here's Wobani, which is where Jyn Erso was hiding out. She was in an Imperial colony on Wobani. Here's Yavin, which is where the Battle of Yavin took place. And here's Edu, which is where her father Galen was killed by the people. Here's Kessel. Nal Hutta, where the Hutts are from. Bothawi, from where the Bothans are from. Here's Scarif, which is where the Death Star was sort of revealed. Okay, was Scarif Base right there. Which again we know from, which we know from Rogue One, and we also know from both Rebels TV series and the Clone Wars, which is why he knew where they were heading when they left Scarif, because there was only one possible course from Scarif from that direction. Because he knew exactly which way they were facing when they left, and they went into hyperspace. So he knew exactly where they were going, because this was a Republic listening post that later became an Empire listening post. Okay, in Scarif. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of different things. Okay, and so this actually shows Luke's route that goes from this unnamed star to Kashyyyk, down here, past Malastare, over, past Endor, and up to Acto. Okay? So, anyway, that basically just kind of demonstrates that, like, that's what the galaxy looks like now. I don't have it in front of me, but I have the, as of 2005, the end of the prequel trilogy, I have a new essential chronology that kind of details all of the books, all of the stuff, all of that. I use it because when I play Star Wars Saga Edition, I use it to make sure that I'm keeping the story consistent, okay, with the in-universe lore. Because again, you have to use in-universe lore. Now we can use bits and pieces of it because the people at Lucasfilm, when they went back and they made The Force Awakens, they used some of that in-universe lore to create Ben. Okay? And also to kind of create Rey, because she's kind of an amalgamation of a couple different characters. And so, in doing so, they wanted to tell their own story, but they wanted to use elements that people were familiar with from the lore, but not using the exact same thing from the lore. Which is why they killed off Snoke in Episode 8, because they wanted to make sure that when they killed off Snoke in Episode 8, that they were going to be able to bring back the Emperor in Episode 9. Okay? And sort of finish out that plot line. Which is why it's called The Rise of Skywalker.
And now, in this new trilogy, we are being introduced to a brand new evil villain who is not just a villain, he is super-powered. This guy has got amazing force powers. He is evil, he's malevolent, he commands his own armies. So, where has he been all this time?
In the unknown regions. Okay? Being kept in reserve in case Palpatine died. And when Palpatine died, and the Empire showed up on his doorstep, Snoke knew it was time to ask. Or act. Not ask. Act. Okay? He knew it was time to get out there and do things. Okay? And that much is clear in the lore. Again, if you read the novelization of Episode 7, you read Before the Awakening, you read, some of those different things, the hints are there, But you have to put those pieces together in your mind. And if you're looking at it from the lens of the original Legends EU canon, which was thrown out by Disney, rightfully so, because they wouldn't have been able to do it with that in place, because then people would have gone, well, then where does Snoke come from? Where did all this other stuff come from? How does these events fit in? How do those events fit in? They're going to be asking the exact same questions that Brandon's asking, and like, well, why does this happen? Why is this? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, the biggest answer is, folks, the lore. They threw out the Legends EU lore in favor of a brand new canonical lore. And so, has Snoke been there? Where was Snoke? Snoke was out in the unknown regions, and when he found out that the Empire had been soundly defeated by the rebels and had set up the New Republic, and they were starting to, kind of create their own government, he, took some people and he went out and he started excavating a planet for a weapon, because he realized that the kyber crystals that were used in the making of the original Death Star through the events of Rogue One, he realized that if he could find the source of those crystals, that they could make a super weapon. One far larger and stronger and more powerful than the original Death Star and even the Death Star 2. Hence why they excavated the planet of Ilum and basically turned it into a weapon. Okay? Called Starkiller Base. And yes, Luke's name in the original manuscript of what was known then as the Journal of the Wills, okay, his name was Luke Starkiller. So that was kind of a nod to supreme fans of Star Wars to note that it was, Starkiller Base, Luke was originally named Starkiller. But he was renamed Skywalker in later things, okay? Because they realized that it was going to be a lot easier to not have to worry about that. Okay, let's do a tiny bit more and then we'll call it good.
Who is he? Where did he come from? Remember, this is a well-established universe and story already. They're not starting from scratch. If they were starting from scratch, then possibly they could get away with not giving us any of their backstory. It's just a matter of saying he's just this evil, powerful guy.
Okay, we're going to stop it there, because this guy obviously doesn't understand what starting from scratch means. Yes, they fucking started from scratch. Because they took out everything that had come before, except for episodes 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6, Clone Wars TV series, and by extension the 2008 Clone Wars movie, and Rebels. That's fucking it, you dumbass. That's starting over. Because now all they have to do, and of course they used the events of these. But this is 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, so, I mean, it's so far removed that nobody really gives a fucking bullshit, okay? This is what pisses me off about fans, okay? In the fact that they cannot separate the Legends EU canon from the new Disney canon. And so they sit there and they go, well, it doesn't make any sense. Well, it does if you divorce your mind from the Legends EU canon, which a lot of people can't seem to do, especially this guy, okay? Because, yeah, they did fucking start over, you dumbass. That's what they did. And if you can't understand that, then that's on you, son, not me. And not Disney. And not Lucasfilm. Because that's what they did. They fucking started over. And so, can you see Snoke in the new canon? Yes. But you have to divorce yourself from that canon. And if you cannot divorce yourself from that canon, then you know what? Ignore these and go back to the Legends EU and shut your fucking cake hole. Because we're tired of listening to you. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think of this Redux series so far. Do you think I'm on the money? Do you think I'm off? And if you do think I'm off, give your lore-related reasons down in the comments below. Okay? And I'm going to kind of continue on with this. I have about 13 and a half minutes left. So I'm hoping that we'll be done in another probably 3 or 4 episodes. It'll depend on how much, I do. Like today I went almost 4 minutes with it. And it's almost an hour long now for the thing. But again, there was a lot that I didn't say before. And there was a lot that I wanted to say. And that's why I'm doing this. Okay? So as we say, we will see you on the next one.